May the words of my mouth and thoughts of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Shalom and welcome all to our KosherTorah open forum. I am, of course, your host, Ariel Tzadok. You find me online at KosherTorah.com. We are in the middle of a series of lessons from the teachings of Rabbi Eliyahu, the famous Gaon of Vilna, from his book called Shelayma. And this is actually chapter 10 in his book. Interestingly, an entire chapter which was left out of the English translation. This chapter, he entitles the rewards and punishments and Garden of Eden and Gaon and the judgments that a man faces when he reaches the other side. Pretty much I've entitled this The Secrets of Life After Death, a journey around the afterlife. It is a very important topic. I mean, we that's one thing that's obviously inevitable. We're all going to die. One way or another, we're all going to end up on the other side. Well, what does that really mean? What happens there? Well, we read all kinds of literature which speaks about heaven, we speak about hell, we have all kinds of fantasy and dreams and beliefs and even theology. And one thing adds and augments to the other and puts all kinds of thoughts in people's heads. And then we have those who have, quote, these NDEs, near-death experiences, each one coming back with their own. It's very interesting. Jewish people have an experience that brings them closer to Judaism. Christian people have experiences that bring them closer to Christianity. And every religion always has an experience of their own in, quote, Garden of Eden or heaven. You never find somebody of one religion having a vision or experience from another religion. There's a very important reason for this. And we're going to get into this in these lessons. I'm almost certain we're not going to be able to cover this all in one class. Let me lay down some basics here. We all know that one of the fundamental beliefs of Judaism, one of the 13 beliefs that Maimonides incorporated, is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. And indeed, our sages are so emphatic in this belief that they insist that this is a biblical concept. And they point to this or that verse to validate it. I'm not here to argue or debate that. Rather than to ask the question, what is really so important about a resurrection? Think about it. Why are we alive in the first place? Why do we come down to earth? Now, of course there is the idea and the belief, integral to Judaism today, of reincarnation. We come back multiple times to get the job done. Be it as it may. In other words, whether that is or isn't true, I don't think is really relevant. But why do we come down here, whether it's 1 or 1,000 times? Why do we have to be born in the first place? Here we are, allegedly eternal souls. We are supposedly in heaven, having a good time, joking it up with the angels and God. And all of a sudden, he says to me, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to send you down to earth. And you look to God and you roll your spiritual eyes and you go, gee, why? What am I supposed to be doing down there? And then God says to you, of course I'm speaking symbolically, well, I got a role for you. I got a purpose for you. Your mission, should you decide to accept it, etc., and so on, like the good old Mission Impossible. We come down here to this earth for a purpose. If we remember way back in Genesis, God created Adam, put him in the Garden of Eden with a task. Not just to come down and hang out, but he was created, if you will, for a purpose, to fulfill a mission. That mission has not ceased. We are here to perform a mission. Now, in order for us to really understand the nature of the mission, it's obviously important that we understand who and what we are as human souls. That's really where we have to be paying attention now. We all know that the physical body is born, lives, and dies. Physical bodies are very frail and fragile things. And they eventually wear out, and they got to go back to the ground from where they came. No brainers there, right? So then what is us? What is we? What are we? Obviously we say we're a soul, but what is a soul? It's a luminescent body similar to Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. Well, you want to know something? That's all well and cool, but if I'm in a parallel dimension which has no physicality whatsoever, what the heck do I need to be a luminescent being in the likes of an Obi-Wan Kenobi? Right? What good does it do? It really doesn't. It doesn't perform a function. And here's where we got to understand things. If I was a human being, what good would it be for me to be a fish? If I am a human being, what good would it be for me to be a bird? The answer obviously is, well, it don't. I don't fly in the air and I don't breathe on the water. So therefore, what do I need a human form body in a completely different dimensional existence? The answer obviously is, you don't. Now here's the secret. A soul, that which we are, is actually some construct of energy which we call a conscious or sentient construct of energy. That's the best way I know to describe it. If you'd ever want to see it, well, how does it appear? It appears in the eye of the beholder. You see, when you see, or I see a soul from within the context of our life here on earth, we see them within the context of what our minds perceive. And therefore, if your mind perceives an ethereal being, that's what you will see. If your mind is Jewish, you will see something Jewish. If your mind is Christian, you will see something Christian. And whatever your religion is, that's what you're going to see. And that is why everybody always has visions within the context of their own religions. Protestants don't see Catholic saints. Jews don't see Yeshua Muhammad. Somebody is asking me in text here, what do atheists see? Usually atheists don't see anything because they're not open to seeing anything. And those that do will usually see some type or form of entity, maybe extraterrestrial or whatever is in their minds. But that's another story. In order to understand what happens to the, in quote, soul when we leave the body, you got to understand first the nature of the soul in general, the purpose of being in the body, and then when we understand all of that, we recognize that the afterlife isn't anything other than a return home to where we originally came from. And now I'm going to give you a little insight. You know, when we have a science class and they make all these cartoons or other types of videos to try to show to us the movement of like atomic particles. You have the nucleus, and then the electrons are whirling around the nucleus at all these super speeds. Well, if you will, from God's or a spiritual eye, that's how he looks at our solar system and our universe. It's whizzing around at a super speed. This is why the Pasuk says that the day of Hashem is like 1,000 years. When God looks at our world, it's buzzing by so fast, boom, that 1,000 years, and for him, for us, I should say, 1,000 years in us is only a 24-hour period for God. There is an inconsistency as to the movement of time in the different dimensional planes. Not only is this applicable to God, it's also applicable to that which we call the soul realm. So that's how come when you go into the soul realm, either in vision or in other experiences, you're in a completely different structure of time. Now, this becomes important because when we leave this world and we go back to where we came from, we literally wake up. And this entire world was as if a blink of an eye, a dream, something that passes by so quickly. And yet, at this moment, we do not experience that. Yet in that moment, we do. Time moves in different speeds, if I can use such a term, is experienced differently based upon your dimensional orientation. Now, in the exact process of death and everything else, we'll get to that. But the Gaon of Vilna opens up with some very interesting moralistic teachings and relationships of benefits to souls. We all know that if we're good, we're supposed to be receiving God's blessings. And we all know that even when we are good, forgive if you don't like my language, too bad. Even when we are good, sometimes life is just bluntly crap. And we know it. No other way around it. And we could go into all kinds of talk about theology and mysticism of how God rules this and how God does that, and reincarnation this, or, however God does. Whatever. Frankly, as far as I'm concerned, it's all entertaining, but it's all talk. Bottom line is, we don't know. We don't really understand. The Gaon of Vilna here has some very interesting concepts and ideas that I think are worthy of our understanding, and in my opinion, important. Because, again, why are we here in this world? Why does God send us here? The answer is, as we said, to fulfill a mission. Well, what is the mission? Well, obviously, it's to learn something. This is school. And, if you will, our judgment in the afterlife is based upon pretty much, did we learn our lessons? And this is why the emphasis of Torah, what our Holy Torah is really all about, more than theology, more than beliefs, more than rituals between God and man, is the emphasis of proper behavior and character between man and man. When the prophets are chastising the children of Israel, what are they saying? 9 out of 10 times, they're chastising the poor behavior between people. If you look to all the world religions, pretty much every one, what is the, if you will, criteria for entry into the afterlife? In other words, a good portion. The answer? That you were good on earth. That you did good with that, whatever the context of the individual society was. You were good, you weren't bad. And as such, this is a common theme. This is a universal understanding of spirituality. This is no coincidence. As Carl Jung has shown in psychology, there's an archetypal level to the collective human psyche. Like the Kabbalah of the Ari teaches us that all souls are united in Adam. Jung says that all minds are connected in the collective unconscious. I think it's the same concept, and I think it's a valid one. Somehow, some way, at some deep level, we all kind of know right from wrong, good from bad. We don't always do it. We often, twist and turn an idea and try to seek to justify bad things. But ultimately, deep down, people kind of know. And as such, that inner knowing is imprinted in or on our souls prior to our coming down to this earth. We come down here, God places us in whatever circumstances, conditions that heaven has so ordained. And remember, we're never really in control of those things, but we are in absolute control of how we respond to them, and we're being watched how we respond. It might be uncomfortable, but it kind of makes me feel like we're like little lab rats running the maze. And, God will put down the little door here or put the cheese over there to see if we're smart enough to work our way through. I know that's not very flattering, but in light of things, it might be an applicable concept. So in that respect, our mission is to learn to embrace what we know as good in spite of whatever intellectual conditioning, manipulation, or brainwashing, or rationalization, or intellectualization which might convince us otherwise. We are here to learn to distinguish between what we call head and heart, physical from spiritual, and to place higher responsibilities, higher needs above the lower. The Gaon of Vilna here now states, Kol osher olam hazeh hu metarpeh ilanei de Gan Eden. All wealth that comes in this world, he says, comes from the symbolic leaves of the tree of the Garden of Eden. It's a very interesting term that he is referring to. Ultimately, any benefits that come from, or I should say that are received in this world, any aspect of physical wealth, symbolically come from the leaves of the trees of the Garden of Eden, which is again a metaphor. It's nothing physical. Please, let's not get rationalist here. When we're talking poetry, don't understand it as prose. What it means, very simply, is that there is, like I said, a wave of energy which underlies all of existence that we understand. Maybe it's something with the parallel universe which gave rise to this one. Maybe it's related to the dark energy or dark matter or anything in this universe that we still don't understand yet. But it is underlying our reality. And we see that somehow, in some way, some people have benefits that simply others do not. Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in his book, The Way of God, refers to this old concept found originally in the Talmud, of course. We call it one's mazal. It's been misunderstood to be your astrological influence. But even though the stars are related to it, it's not that the stars dictate to you. Like Jung has written in psychology, it's more like your psychological predilections towards certain things. Certain people are just open to or attract certain things, and others just don't. And I think one of the greatest challenges in life is to learn how to be one's self as opposed to trying to be someone or something else. That's always a major problem. So any benefit that comes to us because of the underlying energy component in existence, symbolizes the leaves of the trees of a higher dimension, the Garden of Eden. Ein tzadik ochel perot b'olam hazeh. Alright? The righteous do not receive the benefits of their actions in this world. Because ultimately, this world is, as it's referred to in the Talmud, and we discussed this in some of our Ein Yaakov classes, it's called an upside-down world. This world does not have proper values. I think we all know that. That which is valuable here is, irrelevant. Gold, silver, power, wealth, it's irrelevant. But proper character, morals, values help calibrate a soul, like a frequency, like a modulation. Hey, those are terms describing like waves and energies, right? Well, that's what a soul is. It's a sentient, conscious energy. And therefore it is subject to all these concepts of frequencies and modulations. And the way we modulate with, correlate to, align frequencies with that which we call heaven, God, Yud-Ke, Vav-Ke, is by a proper relationship of that which we call behavior. And this is why the Kabbalists innovated, from whatever source, the idea or the concept of what we call the 10 Sefirot, which is an image and a pattern, not of the worlds up in the universe, the other side of the rainbow, but rather inside the human psyche. It is a pattern of the psychology of humanity. And when we calibrate ourselves, balance ourselves, be in harmony, this is called doing the right thing. And therefore the Hebrew word is tzodek. And the one who does that which is tzodek, right, is called a tzaddik, which means righteous. And that's what God puts us here to learn how to be proper, balanced, and calibrated. We all have emotional issues. I know people who get angry all the time. And I tell them, I'm not so much concerned about your anger. Maybe your anger, in my opinion, might be vindicated, right? But it's not a matter of how that you get angry as much as what you do with your anger. Is it something that will motivate you to constructive building or destructive destroying? That's the test right there. What we do when we come to the moment of choice. So therefore, when we learn, when we do what's right, when we calibrate, we become what's symbolically called closer to God. Now let's understand that concept. Because, first of all, what is God? God's not a little old man with a white beard sitting on a cloud somewhere, as we see in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, thanks to our friend Michelangelo. That's fantasy. That's make-believe. Even though our Torah speaks of God in a human personification, God sees, God hears, our sages are emphatically clear that it's because the Torah speaks in the language of man to help us understand abstract principles and concepts. In the days of Moses, or in the days of Moses Maimonides, for that matter, concepts such as energy and the like were not well known, if known at all. In our day and age, when we have these expanded scientific realities, and we understand, now we can explain things. So that when we read Kabbalah literature, and it talks about this face of God, that face of God, and the Seferot and the stuff, we recognize we're not talking about God at all. This has nothing to do with God. Rather, what they have to do with is our perceptions of what we call God. God is the sentient conscious energy of existence. I call it the universal mind. It's not personal. That's why in the original Hebrew it's called the Ein Sof, the ultimate nothing. We can't know or say anything about it because it's just beyond anything in human experience. Yet we have a mind. And as we explore our individual minds, created in the image of the universal mind, then we come to know and experience and understand. And as such, when we speak here about, again, doing what's right, we correlate, we align, we understand, we grow in what's called in the Kabbalah in wisdom and understanding, and that brings knowledge. Not an acquisition of fact or information, but an experiential integration with something which makes us greater than what we were before. That's growth. This is why we're here. This is our purpose. And he says that the righteous only receive the benefit of all this when they return to the world where these things are properly valued. But listen to this caveat that the Gaon says here. He says here, Ella im ken yish tzadikim harbe badur. He says, the only condition here in which this benefit can be received in the individual generation is if you have many righteous people in a generation. Because when the collective consciousness is greatly influenced and swayed, an entire generation can ascend and rise. And we've seen this in the past. And then unfortunately, when the behaviors of a generation go down, the intelligence and the knowledge of the generations go down. That's exactly where we're at right now. Our generation today is full of information. Look at the internet. And equally lacking of wisdom and understanding. It's interesting how we rise in information and lose understanding and wisdom. And yet, when you rise in wisdom and understanding, you don't need as much information. Isn't that weird? Think about it. This is the influence of the collective unconscious, and this is why each and every one of us can have an influence. This is why when we pray and we recite our prayers are not addressed for our individual benefits, but for the benefit of the collective. We are, in essence, psychically projecting thought into the collective. We talked about this in our prayer lessons that we did in the Ein Yaakov series, again available on KosherTorah.com. And he states here that when the collective can be so influenced, then the benefits or these vibrational waves of balance and harmony, called the leaves of the trees of the Garden of Eden, become materialized in this world as prosperity, benefit, and good. But again, a caveat. Dafka imu tov labriut. This only occurs if and when individuals are proper behaved and good to other people. So never underestimate the value of our interactions. We are here to learn, to calibrate, and then influence. In the language of the Kabbalah, this is called Or Yashar and Or Choser, descending light and ascending light. We call it Mayim Duchrin and Mayim Nukvin. Masculine water, feminine water. I discussed this in all my basic concepts and terminology ebook available online. It's a symbiotic relationship. It's a cyclical relationship. It's called Ma and Ben. It's a statement and relationship of balance and harmony with us and the world. And unless you are one with nature, which is God as Elohim, you never are able to rise through what we call the palaces, again a symbolic reference, to levels and gradients of consciousness. So like I was saying, God is everywhere. God is in every subatomic particle in existence. It's the sentient consciousness that tells a quark what a quark is. That tells the electron what an electron is. That tells the neutron and the proton, you do this, you do that. That's what we call the indwelling presence, or the Shekhinah. It's existent everywhere. We can't be disconnected from God. But what we are not is aware of this. So drawing close to God is something we call God consciousness. And in the writings of the Kabbalah, they speak of worlds. They refer to them as Asiyah, Yetzirah, Beria, Atzilut. Nice terms. They're not describing places out there in outer space or other dimensions. They're speaking of gradients of expanding mind and consciousness. And that domain which we call Atzilut, we say it's the domain of the Seferot. What that is the realm where the human mind transcends the limitations of physicality and can have God consciousness, wherein which an individual can experience the reality of the presence of God as it can be known. That's what we call the vessels. Right? What our mind is able to perceive. He continues. Even the benefits that we calibrate and vibrate to this world, we don't necessarily receive individually. It says here, it's given to your children. Why? Why not? We think so small that I do, therefore I have to receive. Right now, gimme, 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 gimme. Sorry, God's not Santa Claus. Again, the nature of the movement of time is such that energy which I receive and project out now might not come back to me for another century. By that time, my physical body is gone, but my energy continues, and continues as a presence here on earth through my progeny. physical or spiritual. And therefore such it comes back. Like the verse in Psalm says, surely goodness and mercy will pursue me. And this is the cyclical nature of things. Now again the Gaon teaches, Tzedakah u'mishpat hem daltot Torah. Charity and righteousness. Mishpat means, if you will, judgment, the law, balance, harmony. These are called the doors to the Torah. Alright? Sechara tzedakah, osher. The reward of giving charity is wealth. Bottom line, the more you give, the more you receive. It's actually a mitzvah to support, I hope, that we're worthy organizations like our own, so that we can in turn support one another. I come to provide information, education, which I pray has some spiritual value, to which I should be receiving in turn from those who receive something of physical value to support and nurture the continuation of the movement of things. That's the way it's meant to be. Charity giving comes in many forms. It's not only with your money. It's with your time. It's with your efforts. It's with your prayers. It's with many things. We are told that we are obligated to give 10%. We call it a ma'aser. In English they call it a tithe. And we should spend it wisely to support that which we truly know needs support. This is a good thing. This is a required thing. Because if you're full, guess what? You can't receive. You have to empty out in order to receive. So therefore, when you are full, give. And when you aren't full enough, still give. Because as you give, you will receive. And as you receive, you will give. And therefore, we build up the cycle. It's like winding up a dynamo. The more we give, the more we receive. The more we receive, the more we give. The more we give, the more we receive. And on it goes. Sechar mishpat. And when we have proper, true justice, the reward is memshalah. Memshalah, if it means government, it means a proper and balanced society. A proper, sane, and righteous government. Oh, halavai, as we say in Hebrew. It should only be that we should merit to have good government. And those who do not perform justice in society and charity to one another, mafsid afa osher ve'umemshala shemagielo mitzvot acherot. It says, you will therefore lose whatever wealth might be coming to you, whatever balanced and proper government might come to us from the performance of other mitzvot. Bottom line, everything is energy. When we learn science, learn the movement of energy, and understand how the universe operates. This is how commandments operate. This is how meditation operates. It's all energy. And when we move in proper balance, we allow the system to flow healthily. But when we don't, the system gets constipated, and guess what happens? Then you get full of, you know what? Not good. Not healthy. Not healthy for the individual body. Not healthy for the sake of the collective. Remember, you are an individual soul, a sentient monad, but we are part of a hive, part of a collective. All souls are one in atom, or we're all connected through the collective unconscious. Whether we want to refer to it in religious psychology, it's the same thing. But ultimately, we all influence and are therefore interconnected with one another. And that's the entire planet. Not just Israel, not just the human race. Everything. And when you can shut up the noise of all the distractions, which is actually a mental exercise, you can hear, you can listen. This is why I so much encourage people like the Baal Shem Tov, Abulafia, and the Hasidim Rishonim, and the Essenes before me. I implore people to please leave urban environments and to go live in a rural area where you can have quiet, where you can have peace, where you don't have all the noise and everything distracting you. You can learn to hear. Think me crazy, but I know people out here who can talk to their animals. Yeah, like Dr. Doolittle, like King Solomon. No, it's not like you can have a conversation about philosophy or art and science with your dog. But there are ways of communicating non-verbally, in which information is communicated. You can talk to the trees. It is said that the Ariel could hear from the trees, from the birds. Now, it didn't mean it went tweet, 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 and the little birdie said tweet, tweet back. But he could sense something, feel something. The rationalist would say, well, it doesn't make any sense. It's irrational. I don't believe it. Who the heck cares what you believe? Doesn't matter. Doesn't make it any less true because you close your eyes to it. It's like love. Love is illogical. Makes no sense. But it's always there. You can deny it in your rational mind all you want. Who cares? Right? If you want to close your eyes to something, that's your right. By all means, close your eyes to anything you want. But if you're blind, don't expect others to be as blind as you are. There is a very interesting midrash written called Perek Shirah, the book or the chapters of praise, where it is said that everything in the universe sings a specific verse of Psalms to God. Now, whether or not the trees and the birds sing this or that psalm is irrelevant. It's a symbol. But the symbol is that everything is in a constant state of harmony and understanding. There is a flow to nature. And if we really want to connect to those higher levels of consciousness and come back to our aligned state, to accomplish these things that the Gaon is talking about, well then, how do you think we do it? You got to do things right. This is why I always implore people to do these types of things. Now, let's move on. The Gaon makes some statements about all the righteous things that we do in this world, brings to us wealth through our good deeds, which is worth more than anything in the world. It's worth more than any type of benefit. But he says something here that sometimes the Hashem provides an individual money so as to help redeem themselves from suffering. Bottom line, sometimes we mess up. Bottom line, sometimes we're not properly connected. And in that state of disconnection, having a screw loose in more ways than one, we throw a monkey wrench into the machinery. Well, guess what happens when we muck things up? We're responsible for that. God will sometimes bless people with financial ability, because by giving charity, that charity goes to perform other acts of repair and rectification to offset the imbalance that the individual did. Sometimes that God does that, he says here. And that's actually a very important concept. And the Gaon goes into great details in explaining this. He quotes here from Proverbs chapter 13, verse 8. Kofer nefesh ish oshro. That a man's wealth can be an atonement for his soul. The rash lo shema v'ara. But the poor, they don't have such problems. You see, when God does not provide you other opportunities, well then obviously you deal with what you got. And in essence, relying upon the gifts of others, charity, being poor, isn't such a bad thing. Because ultimately it gives you a lot less headaches to worry about and a lot more enabling to focus on things. Now, when people worry and fear and have great anxiety about where their next dollar is coming from, that puts them in an early grave. And think about it. Who worries more about their wealth or their finances or getting the bills paid? The rich or the poor? Think about it. Who has greater peace of mind? Sechar mitzvah hu bilti tachlit. The rewards of observing the commandments properly cannot be measured. Alright? However, sins do have a proper measure. Let's explain. When we mess things up, we're obligated to fix things. But when we do what's right, the purpose of the commandments, God didn't just give us commandments for no reason whatsoever. God didn't just arbitrarily look and say, hey, these people like shellfish, I'm going to stick it to them. Hey, shellfish is forbidden. Come on, that's ridiculous. Nothing wrong with shellfish. Nothing wrong with pork. However, the energy in them is not very calibrating with the energy that we want at this time to draw close to God consciousness, and therefore we should not ingest their flesh. That's what pretty much the underlying reasons of kosher laws. Everything is energy. Do I understand all the laws? No one does. But that's irrelevant. We observe the laws because they are a means to an end. And that is what it is. They are instruction. The word Torah doesn't mean gift, present. It means instruction. God's telling you, if you do this, this is what will come of it. You'll calibrate. If you have a radio and you want to tune into God's broadcast, and let's say He's broadcasting at whatever frequency on the dial, well, you know how to work the dial, but you got to go right, you got to go left, you got to get it fine-tuned. That's what the commandments are, to fine-tune you. They align us with ourselves, with nature, with our world. The purpose of Passover, which timing us now in this class, is coming in a couple weeks. Passover is all about independence. Independence is not the celebration of an event in history. It says right in the Passover Haggadah that a person who doesn't see himself as if he himself has gone forth from Egypt has not fulfilled the obligation. Now, in all due respect, I was born, in the 20th century. The Exodus took place thousands of years before I was born. I physically did not go out of Egypt. I wasn't alive in the days of Moses. But that's not what it means. It's about freedom. The first of the 10 Commandments is, God says, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the house of Egypt, out of bondage. Freedom. I have essays all about Passover and freedom on KosherTorah.com. Please go and learn. Read these things, because you will not fulfill your obligations of sitting down for a Passover Seder. You will never fulfill the first of the 10 Commandments unless you understand and live the concept of freedom. And when you live free, you will then be free to be charitable, to be righteous, to be just. And all the shackles that people put on your mind and on your hands will be shattered in truth. Let's move along here. We're running short on time. It says that the wicked, even when they're dying, they are still stiff-necked and they're fighting with the angel of death. But the righteous, they extend their throat, it says, like a dove, meaning like a sacrifice. What is this talking about? When it comes time to going home, you're going through a process of shifting consciousness. The physical body is starting to shut down. The consciousness associated with the body is starting to shift. And here is where the problem comes in. Where are you? The Baal Shem Tov has wisely said, where man thinks is where he's at. Male and female. If you associate with body consciousness, then when the body dies, you die. For you, what will follow will be hell. Because you no longer have a body with which you identify. You no longer have any kind of identity. You are therefore set afloat. Purgatory, Gehenom, Kafakela, all different levels of torment. Simply because you're lost. You forgot who and what you are. And you resist remembering. There's a very interesting teaching that states that when you die at the grave, an angel comes and, like checking you in and asks you, what's your name? And it says then you forget. Gee, I don't remember my name. Then the angel takes out his heavenly rod and beats the snot out of you, trying to get you to remember your name. And there's something called a segula, a little treasure word, which people recite a verse from Psalms that begin with and ends with the letters of their name, so as to remember it when they die. But in all due respect, that's such a lovely little thing, but it's silly. Because your name, the name of your soul, the eternal, the true you, is not something of this earth. I am Ariel. Ariel was born. The body will live and it will die. And when the body dies, Ariel dies. That's it. Done. But who I am, Ariel is my vessel. You, your conscious mind, is the vessel for your true self. What is my real name? What was the name of my soul prior to its coming down? And its eternal name once it goes back up. That's what the angel is asking you. It's like waking up out of a coma. Hey, do you remember who you are? Wake up now. You ready to come home? Do you remember? And you're in such a groggy state. Oh, man. What was that? But if you're so attached to that name, that's gone. Attached to that life that's in the dream. You place yourself in a coma. You refuse to wake up. And the angel's got to beat you to try to disconnect you from this world which you are no longer a part of. Which, from the point of view of a soul, you are only in this world for the snap of a finger. That's how seductive this reality is. That's why God has made genetically us to grow old. Because as we grow old, energies shift within us, psychologically and physically. We all know that. And as it does, we shift our minds and our consciousness away from attachments to this world into something deeper. That's what's supposed to happen. And as it does, this is how we are able to surrender at the moment of passage, going back to that which is home. That's why it's called righteous. Because you've already made the steps in this world necessary to recognize the transitory state of this. And when you have a glimpse and a glimmer of that which is home, man, you jump into it. Poof! That's what's called surrendering to the angel of death. Whereas the wicked fight and fight and fight. And it says here, all the days, right? There is the attribute of justice or judgment, which is accusing you. Meaning, all the times that we're not paying attention to our source, we're going by our limited, disconnected intellect, the rational mind and its blindness, kicking out of its way everything that it can't see, causing all kinds of damage. I'm not interested in listening. Until that moment when the passage comes. And then you're forced to listen because you have no choice. At the moment of death, which is the true moment of judgment, okay? It says here that the soul, listen to this language, it says, Haneshima kodem otohi beraglaim, v'tzericha la'alov legaron, that the soul ascends now, or death begins in the feet and goes all the way up to the throat. Alright, to the Beit Bili'ah, the place where you swallow. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let's explain this symbolic language. That which we call our life force energy, our soul, exists in every part of our anatomy. It's in every organ. It's in every part. So even if you were to lose an organ, your soul, literally, you still have an arm left if you lost an arm. And I've heard of many people saying that they scratch an arm that was amputated years ago. I've heard of very freaky stories of people who have had transplants of organs from dead individuals who start feeling and sensing from the person who has passed. There was one very freaky story I remember reading in the news a number of years ago about an individual, a man, who committed suicide. He shot himself in his head. And upon his death, his wife donated his heart. And the heart transplant person received his heart, thanked the wife, fell in love with her, she with him. And when he recovered, they got married. And then a year later, that same man with the heart of the dead husband committed suicide himself using the same gun that the husband did the first time. Now that's weird. And if I didn't read that in a real news story and had all the details of it, I wouldn't have believed it. But yeah, that stuff really happens. So, very cool stuff. But anyway, we must recognize that the essence of consciousness is in every part of the body. And at the time of death, consciousness starts to leave the body. You become less attached to the body, less attached to the physical sensations. And you eventually become into the drawing breath. The first thing that you lose is your association with the body. And then what's left is your association with your feelings. Your associations, what we call your ruach. And then you disconnect from that to eventually go into the state of just complete essence of what you are. And that is how it has to be. And that's the moment of passing. At this moment, the Gaon says, "Az mukhrach lirot hashekhinah, ben tzaddik uben rasha." Whether you are righteous or whether you are wicked. At this moment, he says here, you see the Shekhinah. But no, I don't want you to think of images like in a Steve Spielberg movie that you see like a blue angel coming out of the Ark of the Covenant kind of stuff. No. You have an experience of, in quote, the light. Some experience it as a tunnel. Some experience it as an experience of overwhelming joy, peace, blessing, good, prosperity. Yeah, because what you're doing is coming out of the illusion of your isolation as an individual separate from the universe and reconnecting with the collective. That is the experience of the Shekhinah. And everyone, good and bad, experiences it because that's the return to the greater reality. But rak berasha hashekhinah mistaleket techef. But when you are wicked, that experience is immediately lost because you can't maintain it. And that exactly is the problem. When your focus of attention is not towards walking down the path, walking into the light, you run away from the light. Well, guess what happens when you run away from the light? Symbolically speaking, you end up in darkness. That's always the way it is. That's, if you will, ingrained. And that's in the definition of the wicked. The wicked are ingrained to run away from higher consciousness, greater integration, harmony with nature, balance and polarity, righteousness and charity. They don't want it. They want to exist within the separate isolationists of their minds, their own concepts and views of right and wrong, their own visions and views of truth and reality, running away from true integration. And when they do that, that is the problem. Someone here in text is asking a question, is the reconnection with the Shekhinah only for Jews? Why on earth would that be true? Is the Shekhinah, the Knesset Yisrael, at the level of Chaya? This level of God consciousness is for all human beings, because it says all souls were one in Adam. Now you could argue theologically between this and that, and I think a lot of those arguments, frankly, are racist. We don't know today who is truly Israel and who is not. Israel today, as explained in Kabbalah, is more a level of soul accomplishment than it is a cultural identification with the people in accordance to halakha, Jewish law as we know. Big difference between the two. So it's really an association, a level of reconnection. Now, is a person who is properly aligned with God, and we know there are many Jewish people who are just not. Now, God has a covenanted relationship with Israel. He put in them a spark, and God's obligation, responsibility, promise to Israel is one way or another, He will make those sparks shine. One way or another, He will use them as His tools in this world. And sometimes the tool isn't a nice shiny diamond set on a ring or whatever. It's a hammer or a nail that really has to get dirty and get hit hard, because that's the nature of its obligation. That's just the nature of Israel. So you can look around in the world today, and all those who are oppressed, repressed, and the like, I bet you if you could trace back their genealogies, I'll bet you they're the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I am of the belief that any righteous of any nation, anyone who has achieved God consciousness around the world, we could trace their bloodline back, we'd find Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob there. That's my opinion. But people are who they are. Even a non-Jew, as it says in Tanah de Eliyahu, free man or slave, male or female, Jew or non-Jew, can receive Ruach HaKodesh, holy divine inspiration, prophecy even, connection, bonding with God based upon who and what they are. So that's the teachings here. So ultimately, those who are disconnected, including those of Israel, alright, don't go around thinking there's such a privilege to be born a Jew. You got to live up to that. Alright? This is a big deal. And this is when what we call problems arise. With regards to the righteous, the Shekhinah, this level of God consciousness, is continuing and brings them to their place. This is called the soul passing with the kiss of God. And it says here you have a vision of 3 fathers or 3 angels who come to escort you to the world beyond. And a lot of near-death experienced people have always said they see like 3 entities before them. And I'm sure there's all kinds of reasons and purposes for that, but that apparently is what it is. But now, in the process of passing, in the few minutes we have left, I will introduce this. He says there are 7 levels of process that a person goes through. Immediately prior to death, these 3 entities come, and they're apparently surrounding us, preparing to awaken the soul as the soul leaves the body. They are there to birth the soul out of the body back to the domain from which it came, to see if you learned what you needed to learn. So, the first of these 7, alright, it says here, Echad, Choshev kol harageim shehaya ba'olam, v'noter heshbono ma she'asa behem. In other words, all of the moments of your life now flash before your eyes. Your entire life is played back to you at super DVD speed. Why? Why and what? Why and what is real simple. You no longer have a disconnected consciousness blocked by the physical brain, which blocks into past, present, and future. You're entering into a completely different domain of consciousness, which is what we call above time, where in which past, present, and future exist simultaneously. So all experience, all memory come back, boom, in a moment, symbolized by your life flashing in front of your eyes. Because you're going into a state of consciousness where in which the barriers of the physical conscious mind are being broken down. The second level is an awareness of all the sins that a person did. Because we came down here to build, to create, to learn, to grow. And if and when we mess things up, all of that becomes aware to us. Every missed opportunity, every wrong decision, every willful, hurtful act, all becomes clear. Third, alright? Shelamed oto Torah bebeten imo, v'chsha ba lirot im hem shlamim ito. The angel. Now, it says here in old teaching that while we're in the womb, an angel comes and teaches us all of God's ways. In other words, our soul is programmed for what its purpose is in life. Then it says that the angel would come at the moment of birth and punches us in the mouth and silences us from such remembrances. They say that's why we have a little cleft underneath the nose and the upper lip there. That's like the knuckle punch of the angel. Nice symbol. But it's true that in the womb, before the creation of consciousness, the growing fetus has what we call collective consciousness. It's still in a state of hive mind. It's still connected to the collective consciousness. And the process of disconnection from that occurs at birth and continues until this world's reality is absorbed. But during the time that you are in vitro, we are taught, we are guided. And now this angel comes and says, wake up, wake up, wake up. Do you remember now? Do you remember why you came down in the first place? The next thing that happens after death, alright, as you're being escorted to the grave, they cry before you, woe to the one who rebelled against the king. In other words, you experience your failures, and that's shameful. Somebody says, well, we recognize this angel as your higher self. Well, it might be your higher self, it might be some other entity. The indication is that it might actually be some other entity from what we call our family of souls. Some people recognize it as a long-lost loved one, or some righteous personage, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Elijah the prophet, or whomever. Each individual perceives the image as such within the context of their own personal being. But that's just the subjective nature of it, as was prophecy itself. So this experience then of our failures, this is our judgment, which I might add, we pretty much call down upon our own head. We are such ashamed because before we came down, we were so pure, so gung-ho, I'll get this done. And now you wake up, oh my God, how did I mess up? How did I get so distracted? How did I get so deceived? How did I get so confused? Then, it says that you're going into the grave, you're judged by these things. And this judgment is called the judgment of the grave, called chibut hakever. Alright? This is the striking in the grain that I told you about. L'dun kol ever ve'ever shenehene b'olam hazeh. Each and every part of your body, it says here, that enjoy the pleasures of this world, not for the sake of a mitzvah, not for the sake of serving God, is judged. All of the experiences which have hindered us, blocked us from experience, blocking us from recognizing who we truly are, all of these shells, husks, klipot, as we call them, have to be removed, so that we can move on. And if you're clinging to them with passion and you don't want to give them up, then peeling them away is a painful experience because you don't want to let go. That's why it's called the beating of the angels. No, it's not like there's an angel there who's got a big stick and he's whacking you with, a baseball bat. Come on, that's all, metaphor. But ultimately, the experience of separation from that which we cling to in this world is painful. Unless you've experienced and embraced all your life the disconnection. So when you are literally poor, you have less to disconnect to. If you're wealthy and you don't want to give up your vast estate and your big car and your fancy trophies and your monies, then that's really hard. That's a painful separation. But if you're poor and you had a rough life, you say, I'm ready to go. And it's much more easy. And you're able to remember. Next, it says here, Dina de Tulata, the judgment of the worm. Nafsho Alam Tevel. Alright? And then he says 6, the Kava Kela. The Kava Kela is our earthbound souls, which happens because of our connections to wasteful things. And it says Na'aseh Ruach. Alright? This is very problematic. Earthbound souls abound. They're what we call the dibuks, the possessions, the source of all, possession and stuff. So desperate to cling to this world that they refuse to go on, that they actually run away from their angelic guides who pursue them. Because it says, surely goodness and mercy will pursue me. But they are so attached, they are ready to beg, borrow, and steal to get back into the flesh. So they'll actually hijack someone else's body. Does that happen? Sure enough does, and everybody knows it. The discussions of that are far more than what we can discuss right now. Someone asks, do we see the ghosts of our loved ones? Maybe, but usually not. Our loved ones are passing on, going on with their experiences and such. And the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, writes in his Sefer Data Tvuna, in the name of the Ariel, something very interesting. That when we pass, we have a remembrance of our loved ones who are still in this world, and we pray for them. Because the link is the love. Will you necessarily see them? Not in any ethereal form, but you might experience them in a dream where they can and do communicate to us. And then finally, the level called Gehinnom. Gehinnom is what we call hell. But hell is not as it's described in Dante or Milton or in the Christian tradition of an eternal damnation. Rather, it is a period and process of rectification. But we've kind of ran out of time in this class, and that's, I guess, where we're going to have to pick up on in our next one. So, on that note, let's conclude here, and we will pick up. We're going to talk about heaven and hell, how it's experienced, and how the soul evolves through the different realms and dimensions, which can only occur because of the lessons learned by coming to this world. It's a wave function. Waves go down in order to go up. We come into this world so we can go up higher. And the higher we go, the higher we want to go. So therefore, when we get to the high of the wave, the crest of the wave, we have to go back down again. And then go up again to go higher. That's why I believe in reincarnation. It's following the wave function of souls. But on that note, again, let's conclude. Thanks all for joining me. God be willing, we'll see you in our next class. Please remember to support KosherTorah.com, especially with your purchases through Amazon.com, through the link on KosherTorah. Remember, all of the ebooks are now available in the Kindle store on Amazon at a price cheaper than it's available even on KosherTorah. Walking in the Fire is now available in PDF on KosherTorah.com, as is Protection from Evil. Please shop our website. Please support us so that we can continue to support y'all. Thank you all. God bless. Happy Rosh Chodesh Nisan. May the blessings of independence and freedom be with us. May God bless us all. Shalom. 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 May God bless us all.